Hey class, if you've already watched the Unit 8 discussion starter video, then you know that there are really two main methods that you'll be using in Unit 8 to find probabilities for a normal distribution. Those two methods will be using the empirical rule, which is also sometimes called the 68, 95, 99.7 rule, and that's just more of a rough approximation, where you have to have values that are exactly 1, 2, or 3 standard deviation units away from the mean, either above the mean or below the mean. Then you'll have other problems that will ask for you to use the Z tables, calculate Z-scores. So this video is just going to walk you through how you can look at the homework exercises and recognize when they want you to use the empirical rule. And then I'll be showing you a few examples on using the empirical rule worksheet that was provided for you. You can always do the empirical rule problems by hand. It's not too tough, and use the graph with the percentages that has been provided for you, or the worksheet will automatically do the calculations for you. So on your screen, you see that I've got the Unit 8 lab homework up, and you'll have a lot of problems that are not really calculations. Like in this case, you're just trying to pick out the graph that appears to be a normal distribution. So I'm skipping over these. This one is, again, trying to figure out which one of the choices would most likely be a normal distribution, or telling whether the example right here would be a normal distribution or not. Then we keep on going. Okay, so when you get to a question such as this one, number 6 out of the 15 questions, it says to assume the resting heart rates are normally distributed with a mean of 85 and a standard deviation of 5. And as you know from other videos in this seminar and so forth, that when we're dealing with normal distributions, the two parameters that you need in order to be able to calculate probabilities are the mean and the standard deviation. So they're giving us the mean of 85, standard deviation of 5. But here's what's really important to notice. Use the rule to find the quantities. Okay, so this first one says we want to find the relative frequency of rates, which means it wants a decimal rounded to 3 decimal places, for the rates less than a 95. All right, so I'm going to pull up the worksheet that's been provided for you. It's an Excel worksheet. And this graph, if you understand Z-scores, then you would realize that the mean of 85 would go in the middle, and it would correspond to a Z-score of 0. The mean always corresponds to a Z-score of 0, because Z-scores are numbers that represent how many standard deviation units away from the mean we are. So the mean is at the mean. But then, since they told us that the mean was 85 and the standard deviation was 5, we would just take 85 plus 5 and get 85 in the middle, then 90, then 95, and then 100 that way. On to the left, we would take 85 minus the 5. So we would have 80, 75, and 70. And if you wanted to do the calculations by hand, you would just get those numbers that I just called out along the scale here. And then you would look at questions and be able to use these percentages that you see provided for you to get the answers to these questions. So like on the first one, it had said, find the probability. Let me go back to the wording. It had said, find the relative frequency of rates less than a 95. So you would realize that the 85, 90, 95 was right here. So that one way we could get this is to add up all these percentages that are less than 95, and we could get our answer. But the worksheet does the calculations for you. So to show you how to use the worksheet, I would come up here and put the mean of 85 in, put the standard deviation of 5. Remember, that was provided for you. And since there's only one value given, then you put it in this third blank. If there are not 2 values given, you leave this last one blank. But if there's only one value given, like in this case, they said find the relative frequency of scores below a 95, then the 95 is the only value given to us. So leave the last one blank, put the 95 in there, press enter, and down here you'll see the program calculated what you needed. It shows you that a 95 would correspond to a Z-score of +2, so it would be right here. We already talked about how we know it would end up right there if we did it by hand. Remember, we were saying 85 plus 5 and plus another 5. So that's where the 95 would be right here. And then just based on that z-score, the program has already calculated the probability below, or the relative frequency below, to be 0.975. And that would in fact be your answer here. Now, if the question had asked for you to find the relative frequency of scores above a 95, then your answer would be this 0.025. But you just have to really look at the wording in the problem and realize that in the problem I just showed you, that they wanted it just below. So, that's how easy it is to use the worksheet for the empirical rule questions if you want to. But just look out for the directions when they say to use that rule. I'm going to flip through a few more. This one obviously does not give you directions to use the empirical rule. It says following the table with standard scores. Well, standard scores are z-scores. So that method wants you to use the z-score formula and the z-tables and be more precise. So you would not use the empirical rule worksheet to do a problem like this. So you will see that most of them want you to use z-scores in the table. Excuse me. Yep, and I'm just glancing through. I honestly think the only other empirical rule is towards the end. Question 15, use the rule again. So you would go back to your worksheet, put in the mean and the standard deviation, and then they want to find the percentage of scores less than 100. So you would put the 100 in for the one value that they gave you and use the worksheet again to get your answer for that. And just realize they're wanting below the 100 again because it says less than. Now, there are multiple parts to that question. So as you skip down, you would get more questions similar to this, although some may say above, some may say in between. And if it says in between, they're going to give you two values. So you would make sure you put the lowest value in this third green box and the highest value in that box. And then the program would go ahead and calculate what's in between. So it's easy to use the worksheet if you want to. It's not even really too tough to do these empirical rule problems by hand if you want to, using this graph provided and those percentages that you see. But, I just wanted to show you what to look for with the actual specific wording in the questions to help you see that it really is very easy. You just got to know what you're looking for and pay attention to the wording this week.